Welcome to today's Town Hall Charting Your Path, sponsored by ASDA's Career Compass. I'm Brooke Kachuris, ASDA's Membership Coordinator. I'm here at the central office in Chicago. Before we begin, note that all attendees are muted so that we don't pick up any background noise during the program. During the presentation, you'll be able to ask questions of the presenters. You will notice a control panel on the right side of your screen. You can type into the question box at any time during the presentation, and at the end we'll answer as many questions as we can. We'll also provide contact information for the presenters if you would like to email them directly. All participants who complete the evaluation survey at the conclusion of the webinar will be entered into a drawing for a leather portfolio and a gift certificate to make your own business cards. Career Compass is a resource to help prepare you for graduation and transition you into the first steps in your career path. ASDA is excited to work with experts in the field to develop new programs and resources for you. Visit Career Compass to explore all it has to offer. The format will be simple. Each panelist will share a few minutes of their dental career path, highlighting a particular experience. Then we'll address the questions you've entered into the question box. And now I have the great privilege to introduce our esteemed panelists. First, we have Aruna Rao, a 2012 graduate of the University of Minnesota School of Dentistry. She's a board-certified pediatric dentist in St. Cloud, Minnesota. During her time with ASDA, she served as the vice chair of what we now call Council on Advocacy. LaJoy Wiggins, a 2017 graduate of East Carolina University School of Dental Medicine. She is a former District 4 trustee, as well as former president of her ASDA chapter. She has completed her general practice residency at Oklahoma University Medical Center Children's Physicians in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And she is currently in the first year of a pediatric residency at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. Becky Warkin, a 2013 graduate of Marquette University School of Dentistry. She is a general dentist in Tampa, Florida, and in 2015, she chaired ASDA's National Leadership Conference. Adam Schisler, a 2012 graduate of the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. He's a DDS, MSD, practicing pediatric dentistry in Houston. He served as the 2011-12 president of National ASDA. Kyle Larson, a 2017 graduate of the University of Colorado School of Dental Medicine. He is a former District 9 trustee, as well as former president of his ASDA chapter. He's a National Health Service Corps scholar and currently works for a community health clinic in rural Colorado. So we're going to get started with Aruna. Why don't you get us started?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Brooke, for that kind introduction. And thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to take part in this webinar. I'm just going to jump right in. My particular journey is pretty straightforward, but I've had a lot of time to think about the decisions that I made along the way to get to where I am right now. To be 100% honest, myself and a few other specialists on the panel might have different stories, but I told myself I did not want to do pediatrics when I started dental school because I had a preconceived notion that children were little double-spawn petri dishes, sticky hands. I didn't have a lot of experience being around young children, but I did actually have a lot of experience working with special needs kids and adolescents. So I was pretty set on being a general practitioner, but of course, my opinion of kids has certainly changed over the years for the most part. But when I look back on the decision-making process, I realized that actually orthodontics was what propelled my particular interest in the dental field to begin with. But in school, I quickly realized that I just wasn't cut out for ortho at all. So my point is just to be really open to all of the possibilities because dentistry is really such a large field. And the beauty of it is that you can really cater your practice to what you really enjoy when it's all said and done. So this particular section is in no way meant to sway anyone toward or away from a specialty because 80%-ish of dental graduates are general practitioners. And we really, really need generalists because specialists just absolutely can't handle the complete load that's out there. So just take the information for what you will, and maybe you'll find a few tidbits that might be helpful. And furthermore, by no means do you have to decide right now on what you want to do. Several of my co-residents and colleagues, friends practiced for several years before coming back to a residency. And I really leaned on their expertise for a lot of things while I was in my training. So I would just say, like, think about maybe the type of worker that you are and want to be. And I think the thing to keep in mind with pursuing any specialty, and my fellow specialists can certainly elaborate, is that you really have to want to do it day in, day out, day after day after day. And so, being that I'm a pediatric dentist, there are others on this panel, you really have to love kids to really do this profession. But on top of that, I knew that I just didn't want to be a jack of all trades. I really honed in on my personality traits and realized that, I'm pretty high energy. I like fast-paced environments. I probably have some traits of ADHD. It kind of helped me realize that I just didn't want to be in certain fields in dentistry pretty early on. But, having friends and colleagues who are extremely focused, detail-oriented, a lot have pursued, say, cosmetics as a specialization within general dentistry. And others are maybe the primary general dentists in their practice who do more of the extractions or all of the root canals or implant surgery. So you can really find your niche. And you may not have to pursue more school, or more school may not be an option for you depending on your situation, but you can really take advantage of extra training or take on more complex procedures while in school, so you can focus in your practice in areas that you really, really enjoy. And I'm not going to get into this. LaJoy will take the heat on a lot of this stuff, but just as an aside, several specialties are requiring additional tests like oral surgery. So you just really want to make sure you're aware of those requirements and be prepared. And it's also really knowing about your limitations as a practitioner. I really rely heavily on my general dentist referral base and other specialist referral base to really do procedures that I'm not comfortable with. Some things just become too risky or too complicated, where I feel like I can't provide the highest standard of care. And those things can ultimately become really dangerous and a liability. So it's really best to understand those risks before providing treatment that can be eventually out of your scope if you decide to pursue a specialty program. But the beauty of being involved in organized dentistry as a student, like all of you are, is that your network expands like tenfold. And I loved being able to talk to professionals from around the country on their work and their hometowns. I met general practitioners who lived in like rural Colorado, who routinely like placed implants or took out wisdom teeth because the closest oral surgeon was like 50 or 100 miles away. So they really got additional training to feel comfortable with certain procedures. So continuing education is a wonderful thing. And if you're not already aware, you'd be amazed at the level of CE courses available in various treatment modalities. And just some other things to keep in mind. Acceptance into some programs are initially predicated on things like your grades and scores on exams. And it's really just a reality. And as much as I want to elevate all students in their professional careers, I learned this the hard way, and we all learn it, that nothing is really guaranteed. And if you're uncertain about where your standings are in relation to maybe a competitive residency, now is really your time to ask questions, network, email your programs, navigate your standings, and so just kind of figure out where you stand so that you can be more prepared. And that leads me to my next point, is that it's not a bad idea to have a backup plan in mind. And for many of you, that may just mean finding work right away, maybe post-matching. For me, I concurrently interviewed at GPR programs in addition to pediatric programs. So just make sure you ask the right questions to find out what's more appropriate for your situation. And then finally, please don't do something just because of the money. It sounds really cliche to say something, but honestly, it's absolutely not wrong to want to be able to provide for yourself, your family, pay off your loans, etc. But pursuing a specialty for monetary reasons is really misguided. There are incredibly successful general dentists out there in the country who are just doing amazing things and are plenty secure. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So when you surround yourself with experts in finance, you'll be on track for financial independence. So don't worry about that. But ultimately, don't stress yourself out about making these decisions right now. School is really the most important time to ask these questions, absorb as much information as possible, and really mess up like left and right, because the real world really isn't always as friendly. So with that being said, that concludes my segment, and thank you all, and I wish you the best of luck out there in your endeavors.
Thank you so much, Aruna. Next, we have LaJoy.
Well, hi, everybody. Once again, I'm LaJoy, and for my contribution to the webinar, I want to talk more about what life is like being a resident. As mentioned before, I'm currently in my second residency program. I'm at Virginia Commonwealth University's Pediatric Dentistry program, and previously I completed a GPR residency at Oklahoma University's Medical Center, in which it was a joint program not only with the Children's Hospital, but also with the Veteran Affairs Hospital, which was very rewarding in itself. But I can honestly say I have a lot of experience about being a resident and understanding the full, what we can say, responsibilities associated with that. So with that being said, I like to kind of comment about what Runa said, was that, you know, you have to want to do it. This is not something that you just kind of just want to do just because, oh, I don't have anything else to do, let me just go ahead and just do a residency. You have to actually want to be here, because there are going to be some really hard and stressful days. There's going to be some long nights, like tonight after we finish tonight. On this webinar, I have a 60-page book that I have to read by in the morning so I can discuss it with the group. So you have to be committed to the program in order to do that successfully, so you can be prepared. But whatever reason why people choose to go into a residency, whether it's for more experience, whether they're unsure about the career path, or whether they want to specialize, generally being a resident around the board is probably the same. The core of it is generally the same. And so I wanted to provide my perspective on things that you can expect when being a resident. As for myself, this was one of those things that I had to do some externships about, as well as do a lot of research about, because I didn't really know much about being a resident. And so I kind of wanted to know what I was getting myself into. So hopefully after this webinar, you guys will have a better idea. So the first thing first is that there are resident expectations. What does that mean? It's like any other job. It's a contractual agreement. So when you sign onto it, that means you're adhering to all the rules and regulations that come with that residency. Usually these are outlined in a policy manual, which is given to you not only the first day, but it's reiterated throughout the first week of orientation. And you are to sign that, saying that you agree with everything that is listed in that policy manual, which includes the clinic arrival time, seminar, your expectations for seminar, preparedness as far as readings go. All those things are included in your policy manual. And so once you sign that, that's saying that you are officially signing up for everything that this residency entails. And so if you don't meet those requirements, there's some consequences that come with that, such as maybe a lost vacation day, different disciplinary actions such as suspension from clinic, or even worse, expulsion. And that seems very extreme, but I have heard of several occasions where residents didn't show up for a seminar, or they just kind of neglected their responsibilities and they were asked to leave the program. So hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but just know that residencies are a job and they should be taken seriously. The next thing I want to talk on is basically preparedness. And I love that theme that Runa was talking about, is that it's very important to be prepared, especially in the residency program, not just for yourself. You want to be prepared for yourself so you know that what you're doing, you know that you could practice in a non-stressful environment, but as well as you don't want to be causing a detriment to patients' care. Especially in these residency programs, most likely you will be seeing more medically advanced and compromised patients. And so if you're unprepared, you can really be setting back some patients on their health care if you don't know the contraindications to care as far as their, their medications go, or as well as a health history. You have to be adequately prepared, as well as your attendings are expecting you to be prepared, because you're no longer a dental student. You're now a trained professional, and they're going to expect you to be a trained professional. And that includes you knowing your patient's history, being prepared for all of your clinical activities, and be prepared to have an educated conversation with your attendings and not expecting to be spoon-fed. So those are one of the things that hits you very quickly when you get into a residency. And honestly, by being better prepared, you will find yourself that you quickly become a better clinician, you will better communicate with professionals, and you will, like I said, know what you're doing, which is the ultimate goal, is to gain more experience with a residency program. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is basically the rigorous schedule that you're going to have in a residency. So one thing that I have signed on to, I have learned this from both my residency programs, that my life is whatever life my program decides for me. So therefore, they can decide that they want to have a lecture at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's fine. We're showing up to clinic at 6:45 in the morning, or they can decide that we are going to have a additional lecture at the clinic. Whatever that may be, I am signed up for that program, and basically I have to be very flexible to whatever we are deciding to do that day or that week. There are other things that are required from us, such as literature reviews, seminars to attend, treatment planning seminars. Then there may even be some extracurricular activities, such as volunteer opportunities that they are expecting residents to be a part of. All of those are just things that you kind of sign up for, and you just know that whether you choose to go or you're voluntold to go, it's going to be added to your educational experience. So you just basically suck it up and go. One of the biggest things that I love about my residency experience, both in Oklahoma here, is the ability for us to take trauma call. So what trauma call is basically after clinical hours, if someone has a issue such as they lost temporary for more AGD programs, or for my programs more trauma-based. Basically, I saw a lot of kids who got hit by bats, car accidents. I'm basically attending to their care and their needs during that time frame. And that's basically, it could be splitting teeth. It could be just basically get them to a more stable point than when I can see them the next day. One thing I love about trauma call is that it really does test your ability, as well as whether you know information or not. And so that's one of the things that, it's a love-hate relationship, because sometimes you do get paged at 2 o'clock in the morning, but at the same time, you do feel more confident as a provider upon completing your call and knowing exactly what you're doing. So, and trauma call can vary based on different programs. Some programs have 10 residents, so they probably go in every 10th week, and some programs only have 3, so you might be going in every 3rd week for call. Another thing I would like to touch on is basically compensation. So this is just one of those things across the board at all residency programs. You're going to take a pay cut. You're not going to be making as much as your fellow co-residents or your fellow peers from dental school who just went out in straight practice. But what you will gain is additional experience. You will be able to practice under the supervision of other dentists. One thing I personally love is the fact that if I have any kind of treatment planning questions, I'm able to ask somebody off bat and get their opinion and get their feedback. And that is just so rewarding for me, is that, I have somebody looking right over my shoulder where I can ask, hey, should I do this? Should I do that? And I'm able to get an immediate answer. And I know that I'm providing the best care for that patient at that time. So that's one of the things that you kind of just give and take with a residency program. Now, granted, there are people who go out and practice, and they practice with a mentor, and they gain that same kind of experience. That's just one of the things I typically like in a residency. It's just the fact that I'm able to try new materials. I'm able to order things that I want to try, as well as I'm able to go to the OR and have one-on-one time with my attendings and truly learn side by side how I need to practice dentistry, which I think is very rewarding. And I think that about covers it. Only one more thing I want to touch on is competencies. So you're no longer in dental school, so most residency are not going to have competencies or didactic materials, but if you do go to a more academic program, trust and believe that you will have to take some tests, whether that's just to measure your attentiveness to class for participation, or to measure your actual competency and the knowledge that they're providing. So you might want to do your research. If you're not interested in taking tests or doing things of that nature, then an academic-based program may not be best for you. You may want to go to more of a hospital-based program. However, if you like having tests and having more scheduled ways to measure if you know information, then you might want to consider that as being the ideal program for you. So there's a ton of things I could touch about being a residency program. However, I am free for you guys to contact me, whether it's during the question and answer session or during after hours. If you guys want to reach out to me, you guys will have my contact information. So
thank you so much, Joy. Next, we're going to go to Becky.
Hello. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here tonight. I know I only graduated 5 years ago, but I was not always on top of all these webinars and things like that. So you're already steps ahead of where I was in school. And so Congratulations to you. That's awesome. Unlike our first two panelists, I did not attend a residency. Not because I was just ready to be done, but just because I didn't feel it was the best fit for me. When I left school, I felt competent to go into practice, and I felt like I was, ready to move forward with practice. That's not going to be the case for everybody in every program, but for me, that was really how I felt. And so I just jumped right into practice. And so I'm kind of covering tonight that associateship piece of everything. And so when I left school, I went straight into practice. I actually worked for a corporation for 2 years, and I would not have changed that for anything. And I can honestly say that how not working for a corporation. And I've since worked for 2 other private practices and am now in the process of buying into a private practice. But my start in corporate practice, I would not have changed. I learned so many things, and I was really able to get my feet wet and really figure out what I wanted practice to look like for me. Part of the reason I didn't specialize or go to a residency is because I really like all of dentistry. Aruna talked about not really liking to be the jack of all trades. This is why I love Aruna, because I'm the opposite of that. I love to be the jack of all trades, but there's still things I don't like to do. And so I love that there's specialists that can take care of those things that I don't really enjoy doing or know are just out of my scope of practice and are not where I should be. And so corporate practice really allowed me to get a lot of experience, a lot of continuing education, a lot of support, and a lot of learning of the business of dentistry. It's no secret that dental school doesn't really teach us how to run the business of a practice. We have practice management courses. We start to get our feet wet in dental school with those things, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. And really, until you get out into the practice of dentistry outside of academics, you don't quite understand that business of dentistry piece of it. And that's no fault to the dental schools. It's just that you have to be doing the business of dentistry to enjoy and understand the business of dentistry. So corporate practice really allowed me to do those things with less risk to me financially. I had some financial security. I was, able to really pick up on a lot of those things and continue learning without it being all out of my own, pocket. So that was wonderful. I then moved on to a private practice. And what I want to stress from the associateship piece and if you're going to look for an associateship, whether you specialize or don't specialize, everybody's kind of touched on it here, but I cannot stress enough the importance of networking. I found my private associateships and ultimately my practice home through networking. And I don't just mean like on the local and state level. I mean, really get to know your specialists, those that are around your practice, or if you want to practice in a certain area and you know that's where you want to be eventually, get to know those specialists. Specialists know so much about areas and patient bases and who's in the area, who's looking for an associate, who might be looking to sell their practice. Beyond that, one of my greatest friends and greatest assets has been one of my local reps for Henry Schein. It doesn't have to be Henry Schein. It could be Patterson. It could be Benco. It could be your state dental associations, if they have reps for their services. Those people are the people you really want to get to know. They're in practices every single day. They know, if they get to know you and they know a practice, they get to know if that's going to be a good fit before you would even set foot in that practice and know if that's a good fit. So I really, really recommend getting to know just your local reps and your local specialists. In addition to, getting to know the local general dentist, obviously. But general dentistry, even I think specialties are kind of weird when they're starting to talk about, selling their practices. They're not open about that. They're not even open about wanting an associate sometimes. You have to know the right people to get in. That's why finding good associates and finding good jobs can be a little bit difficult. So I really recommend networking and getting to know people. The other thing I wanted to touch on is when you are looking at or starting an associateship, I really, really encourage you, and I know that people kind of touch on this, but begin with the end in mind. And by that, I mean, if you're going to have a contract, really know, how that contract would end if it were to need to end. Because if your intent is to be an associate forever, then awesome, find your home and be an associate forever. If it's not, then you need to have in mind what's going to happen if there's going to be a buyout or buy-in process, and that should be discussed from the get-go. It doesn't have to all be decided. It's kind of like dating. You want to get to know somebody, but at the same time, eventually that conversation of what's not coming next is going to have to come up. So if you kind of touch on it, you want to know if somebody's not interested in marriage at all, if you are. And so it's important to have those conversations early so that you're not heartbroken that they have no interest in that if you do. But also know what it looks like to get out of a contract, because not every fit's going to be perfect and you don't want to be miserable. So if you need to get out, you need to know what that looks like. Is it a 90-day notice? Is it a 60-day notice? Is it a 30-day notice? Is it no notice? Are there consequences if you decide to get out before a certain amount of time? Everybody's different. Associates are all different, and corporate is all different. So pay attention to those contracts and have somebody look over it so you can have a full understanding of it. And then finally, really, stay linked with your network, because that can be how you find the perfect job. It can be how you, get out of a not so great job and into a better one for you. And don't be afraid to do that, to move. Not everybody's going to be happy in their very first position. I can honestly say that my experience in several practices has been the best thing for me. It has allowed me to figure out how I want to practice, what I want to do, what I want my practice to look like, who I want to practice with. And it's really given me the opportunity to land in the group practice that I'm in now that involves, it's a private practice with 6 dentists. It's specialty. It's, we have pediatrics, an orthodontist, and general practice, and it's the perfect fit for me. But I would never have found that or known that I would like more of that group setting if I hadn't worked in other settings first, to know that me being the only person in the office really wasn't satisfying for me. I like people and I like other doctors to bounce things off of. But at the same time, the corporate larger group practice also wasn't satisfying for me. But had I not done them both, I never would have figured that out. So I highly encourage you not to feel like you're locked into anything. Try 2 associateships at one time, part-time if you need to, and just be open to all of those opportunities and figuring out, what works best for you truly, because your careers should be, and we want it to be, a long one. So you want to be happy. And I think a lot of us freak out in the first couple of years of practice thinking that, we have to stay with what we started with, when really sometimes a change is good. So any questions about associateship, feel free to, shoot them at me at the end of this, and I'm going to let Adam come on up.
You got it, guys. Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to kind of invest in yourself and invest in what possibly is really going to be a pretty dramatic impact in how you perform dentistry and what you really get out of the profession. I am a private practice pediatric dentist in Houston, Texas. I'm a partner in a group practice that has 6 pediatric dentists. It's owned by 3 of us, and we have 3 different locations. So there's a lot to kind of unpack there, and it didn't all just look like that when I joined the practice 4 years ago as an associate. But what kind of piggybacking off what Becky was saying is, if you kind of have the end in mind and you really know what you really want to do at the end, or kind of possibly what you think you want to know what to do, one way to really get there is have the flexibility of being in a private practice. As a private practitioner, you will have the availability of creating however you want to practice dentistry. And I think all of the panelists will agree to us, or agree with me tonight, is that dentistry is really hard. The actual practice of it is not the easiest profession, just on physicality, on your mental state, on your emotional state. So in order to cater it to a way that is long, that has some longevity, flexibility and creating the way that you like to practice is very important, because you really do need to be happy. And that is the true beauty of private practice. You can make it look however you want to look. If you want to do 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. no lunch, if you want to only work 3 days a week, if you want to work on the weekends or never even think about working on the weekends, all of those flexibilities, no one is telling you what you can and can't do. So the possibilities are endless, but then also the responsibilities continue to add on. So like I said, I was an associate for 2 years. It was an associate to buy-in contract option that had basically non-refusal. So if any portion of the practice that was being sold, it would be sold to me first. That was something that I walked in from day one as the associate in my contract. The length of the associateship wasn't necessarily defined, and I think maybe that was possibly something that I could have negotiated a little bit better on the front end. But in the end, really the seller and me being the buyer in a partnership agreement, it was going to be something that was going to work out for both of us in the end, because in the end now we both own the practice. Really the big questions I get a lot of times about people leaving dental school heading into residency is, when do you have to have all this sorted out? And I think the biggest thing is you need to find really in your mind, you need to illustrate what you want to practice, how you want to practice, and most importantly, you need to be really comfortable with a really good idea of where you want to practice, because there's a significant amount of investment that you put into, and once you really start doing a build out and you start getting into filling the spaces and marketing yourself, you're going to be there for a while. So that needs to be a place that you're super comfortable with. That's a place that you really like to be. But guess what? The nice thing about it is you get to really essentially choose. You can choose to be really wherever you want, and dependent on the market. And there are a lot of individuals that you would never guess are doing that well in either a rural setting or a super urban setting. And I have a lot of friends that do very, very well financially in almost every single setting, whether it's rural or urban or specialty only or group practice or single solo doc. It really is, the flexibility is there. Some experiences that I had was buying into our practice. Was part of my buy-in practice was everyone asked about, well, how about student loans? What did you do about your student loans? Where did you get them before the bank would approve of your student loans? So my initial buy-in was an outside finance, meaning that Bank of America, actually I applied for a loan for the buy-in to pay the portion of my practice to go in, and then the remainder is going to be owner financed. So it's actually, we're going to finance it throughout our own practice, which is a really, really nice thing, because you don't have to deal with the bank. But then the other thing is just more money that you would end up owing to the actual seller. As it goes with student loans, everyone has them. Banks are still giving money to buyers or individuals that are in acquisition, even with very large student loan debts. Now, that doesn't mean, well, just go ahead, don't worry about the student loans. Begin to start talking with a practice financing broker, just so you have an idea, they have an idea of where you at on student loans. But really, it was much easier than I kind of thought it was going to be regarding what levels I needed in my bank account, or what my debt to income ratio needed to be. Really, we were qualified all the way throughout. It was more just trying to get all the paperwork and everyone to agree what the final numbers were going to be. The other thing that I get a lot of questions about regarding an associateship to partnership is the evaluation of the practice. And there's not a good way to do it necessarily that's best for both parties. Like I said earlier, I bought into a practice that I'm a partner with the seller. So therefore, in the end, it had to be best for the business, not necessarily better for, I didn't want to feel like I got them, because I was going to be a partner with this individual for a long time. And then that window is up, and then the partners, we basically get the rest of the, or we purchase the remaining amount of the practice after a certain time window. I've seen it go really, really nicely if the evaluation is done early, but then it not hold up whenever actually the final evaluation is done. Because a lot of things change in dentistry. It's a 6-month cycle. So if you really, think about it, every 6 months, you're really kind of churning through a different recall base. And in pediatrics, 80% of our production is essentially just prophies and cleanings, and it's mostly recall and recare. So that building of the practice is mostly off of something that's already there. It's not something that's just going to pop up in a new referral base. But that's our practice. That's how it works. I would love any sort of questions that you guys have just regarding whether it's the lifestyle, how we cater to it. Again, we're only pediatrics, but a lot of people do have a lot of questions regarding multiple locations and how all that works. But if you have any questions, feel free to type them in or filter them through Brooke. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. And last but not least, we have Kyle.
All right. So I'm going to talk about practicing in public health dentistry or in a public health setting. The first point that I want to make is for new grads specifically. I think that public health is a really good place to start, if not continue to be in if you enjoy what you do. So if you think about everything that you're stressing about as a fourth year or someone who's thinking about graduation, it's always things like, well, aside from the licensure issues initially, then you start thinking about paying back your loans. You start thinking about your salary or your income, how that's going to be. You start thinking about maybe running a practice, running a business that you may not have a lot of training for, those sorts of things. So what I like about public health dentistry is that the majority of the jobs out there, if you work for a place like a federally qualified health clinic or an FQH, or I guess that is an FQHC, but a community health clinic or those sorts of practices or clinics, is that all of that is kind of taken care of for you, and you don't really have to worry about that too much. And I'll explain that a little bit more. Is so coming right out of school, like I said, you're worried about loans, you're worried about income. Well, with public health dentistry, there are a lot of things that are a little bit more enticing than the unknown world of trying to produce more so that you can earn more. Taking the stress out of that is public health. A lot of the time, you're not paid based on production. You're paid on a set salary, which was really comforting for me, being a little bit slow. Everybody is coming right out of school. You don't have to worry about putting patients in the chair. That's taken care of for you by the clinic manager, by the schedulers, all of that. A lot of the time, there's the option of some sort of loan repayment that you can sign up for. Me specifically, I had the National Health Service Corps scholarship, which gave me a full ride through dental school. They paid my tuition and fees, as well as some other helps along the way. And what that did is that gave me the freedom from those sorts of things, from worrying about my income, from worrying about my loans. Another thing, I guess, credentialing and whatnot, that's all taken care of for me. Any issues that may arise with labs, with patients, with staffing issues, that's not my thing. I don't deal with that because I'm not the owner. I don't really have a stake in that. Of course, I'm involved in a lot of that, but I guess, for example, today, we had a case kind of go wrong with a removable partial denture, and we had been trying to work with the lab, sent it back 3 times, and finally we decided to change labs. Then the lab got upset because we supposedly still owed them. The patient was upset because it was taking longer than expected. I just phoned my clinic manager and told her what was going on, and she took care of it. She's calling the lab tomorrow. And she already talked to the patient and kind of smoothed things over, and that's a huge worry off of me. So I really like just being able to focus on patients and not having to worry about that extra stuff. So if that's something that you really want to focus on right out of school, then I think public health is a great place to be. As well as, so I guess the scope of your practice, the amount of procedures and the type of procedures that you do, you really get to do a lot. So if you like doing everything, you don't like having to refer, those sorts of things, you get to do that in public health. I do molar, endo all the time. I do dentures, I do crowns, I do, of course, fillings and whatnot, but it's something where I'm never bored. I see a bunch of different patients and a bunch of different procedures every single day. No 2 days are alike, no 2 patients are alike. And of course, you can say that for anywhere, but specifically with public health is that most likely if you're not doing it, nobody is. You can refer to specialists, but where I live, the nearest specialists are at least half an hour, 45 minutes, or even I think endo, the nearest one is in Denver, so it's about 2 hours away. So I try my hand at a lot of things, and I let the patient know ahead of time, if I can't do this and if you can't make it to a specialist, then we'll abort in the middle and we'll think of a different way to handle this situation and get you your oral health back up to speed, whether that's pulling this tooth or whether that is finding a way to get you to a specialist. But yeah, so public health, it's a very unique facet of dentistry that I don't think a lot of people look into. So look into it. If it's not for the loan repayment or scholarship aspect, then look into it for some of the other things, like not having to worry about anything but the patient specifically. So that's all I have. So I think next we're going to do Q&A, but I'll pass that back.
All right, thank you so much, Kyle. We are going to open up to the questions. We'll try to get through as many of these as possible for you. Go. Okay. First question, what do you read or review to be ready before the day at residency?
Well, me personally, it just really depends on what I have scheduled that week. So let's just say, like on Thursday, I know I have growth and development. And so what I will read is those signed corresponding readings for that class that day. Most likely, in order for me to get through all those readings, I'll have to start either Sunday night or Monday night to accomplish all those readings, just to make sure that I'm adequately prepared. They have different ways to kind of test if you have read them. And that's just basically asking a lot of questions and calling you out. And so basically you just want to kind of be prepared. Also, say if I know I'm doing a bunch of stands and crowns or I have a more difficult case, I will often just do my own personal research on different medical conditions just to make sure that when the patient comes that day, I'm adequately prepared or prepared enough to ask my attending an educated question. So it just kind of depends, but basically it's just going to depend on what's on my schedule that week.
All right, I want to work in a community health center and even open my own center. Is there any specific opportunities you pursued to be more prepared for it?
Nothing specifically that I pursued, but something that was of benefit to me in my 4th year is that our dental school allowed us to go on, well, not just allowed, it was part of the curriculum to go on rotation. So approximately half of our 4th year, we actually spent rotating through community health centers. And so that not only helped me to get my clinical skills up to speed, but it also allowed me to do a lot of networking. And so a few of my rotations actually turned into more of working interviews than they did anything else. So, I mean, anything to prepare, I'd probably say network, go to NOAA conferences, that's the National Network for Oral Health Access, and start just trying to immerse yourself in those sorts of networks and groups of people.
How do you find your ideal place to set your practice? What was your thought process and who helped you?
So in pediatrics, there's like a trifecta. You have an elementary school, an orthodontist, and a pediatrician. So if you have those three, usually as a pediatric dentist, you're going to do really well. So that was what we went through. Now Becky may be able to answer something about you know, her experiences, whether you know, she has any experience on finding anything. You're going to find that there are going to be plenty of brokers that are going to try to sell you something, but their information, they're trying to get you in a lease holding. It's not always the best information. Um, Someone said earlier about asking the specialist around and knowing kind of what the flow of patients is. That's a really good thought process, because it just allows you to know really how are these patients moved in and around. So it's not scientific, and you can pay a lot of money to have someone tell you that it sounds scientific, but really for us in pediatrics, it's visibility and convenience, because we're really catering to the parents and the moms.
I would jump in a little bit off of that question. Is if you hypothetically wanted to try to start your own practice versus joining in with like a group. One really nice thing I was told years ago by just a random friend in dentistry who was a few years older than I was if you're smart, you go where the work is. And I really have always thought about that ever since, because, you know, there are a lot of saturated markets in various cities, and you'd be amazed at like the level of need there is just, you know, 30, 40 miles outside of a major metropolitan area. And if it's something that you want to start up on your own, it's really about like getting to know the communities that are in need. And there's all kinds of information and statistics out there. You could even approach like your local dental school, and they can give you statistics on where dentists are and what populations and what counties are growing, and the relative information or the relative populations dentist to patient ratio. So I practice about 66 miles northwest of where I live, and it's about an hour commute one way. And it was frankly like the only job that was available when I was job searching. So it's just really nice to be able to like maybe scope an area that you're interested in, and then you can do very, very well and outside of a metro area.
What made you competitive to be accepted in residency?
I think we all can answer, well, three of us can answer that. I think for me, just to be honest, with the amount of extracurricular activities that I participated in, including ASDA, I was not the top of my class. And I definitely think that the extracurricular activities, as well as my personality, as well as my work ethic, stood out. Another thing that stood out about me is that I had strong recommendations from not only faculty within my school, but also outside dentists, such as members in the ADA who spoke about my behalf. You will also find out that dentistry is very small and everybody has friends everywhere. And so if you have a good reputation, I think that goes very, very far, especially when applying for programs. But I think just being yourself and being a likable person is something that most residency programs do look for, because they have to be around you for an extended period of time. So they actually want to get to know you. And a lot of times they're not looking for, you know, that 4.0 student who just makes a lot of good grades in class. They're looking for somebody who, you know, is teachable, somebody who likes learning, somebody who's dedicated, who doesn't mind coming in at different hours of the day, and who doesn't complain. So basically, I just say to those, especially those students who may be questioning like, oh, I don't think I'm ready to be a specialist, or I don't think I'm qualified. You never know until you actually apply. So I think it just depends, but I'll let everybody else kind of contribute to that question.
That's a tough question, because those of us who have been involved in the match process, it can feel very random and unexpected. Adam, I believe, was a chief resident at his program, so he was probably on the decision making and was able to, you know, we all like interviewed candidates and were able to provide our recommendations. In some ways, it could be just a personality quirk, that you get along well with people, you're a team player, no drama. But obviously, three of us being pediatric dentists, if we had like an oral surgeon on this panel or an orthodontist on this panel, that could be very, very different. And I would suggest, if you're interested in certain specialties, to approach those program directors directly, or former residents in the field that you're interested in.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say would just be the better your class rank and the better your grades are, the more options you're going to have. It doesn't mean it's a decider of whether you get in or whether you don't get in. It's just you're providing yourself more options. You may have a better opportunity to interview at more places, have more areas on your, or have more locations on your match. And then on the back end, being from the side of individuals that help select those, it just, the candidates are, they make the decision from the program side a little bit easier if their entire curriculum or their entire resume is super strong. And then the only other thing that I would say, just, you know, all of the extracurriculars are absolutely excellent and great, and that's wonderful. But really, when it just comes down to it's really nice to have a really good set of grades. So.
How do you stay in touch with networks?
I can kind of touch on that one first. You know, one of the things that I do is, Florida's weird. I'll start with that. We're not just like the tripartite, we have a quadpartite. So you have like your local county, and then we actually have like a entire like part of the state that we're divided into. I'm in the West Coast, and there's different parts of that, and then the state level, and then ADA. So they break it down even smaller. Most states, it's like your county or local area, and then your state, and then ADA. So one of the things that I constantly do is every single month I go to my state or my county dental association dinner. I know that sounds so nerdy and so lame and like not all that exciting, but that's where I see all these specialists. That's where I interact with all of these people. One of the other things I do is I actually call my specialists. Not every general dentist does that, but I actually call all of my specialists to speak about cases at least once a month, if not once a week, depending on the case. If I'm calling in a specific case, or like for instance, this morning I called an endodontist to see if he could see a patient this day. I called him myself. I don't have my staff call him. I don't have, you know, and I'm weird that way, but I'd much rather, you know, talk to them myself and say, hey, this is where, this is the situation I'm in. Can you help me out? This patient needs help today, type thing. So that's how I maintain that network. And then beyond that, it's just a matter of, you know, I'm in study groups, I'm in study clubs. I have a fantastic spouse that is willing to take my kids in the evening here and there so that I can do those things. And, you know, we work as a partnership so that he can do those things in his career as well. I think that's important and not spoken of all the time. But it's one of those things where it has to be planned. You know, we sit down at the beginning of the week and say, hey, I've got these meetings these nights and these meetings these nights, and we plan it all out so that that networking can happen. There's a lot to be said for, you know, emails and FaceTime, but like actual face-to-face time for me has been huge for my networking. So I try and attend all of those things when I can. Doesn't happen all the time, but as often as I can, I'm at those places.
How does corporate dentistry lifestyle differ from private practice lifestyle?
For me, it was a little, it's almost the same day to day, because you're kind of, in most corporate practices, you're running your own small semi-private practice. You just have a lot of backup when it comes to that kind of stuff. You have an HR department to call. You have, you know, staff that comes in and goes through training that's very rigorous and systemic for every single office. You have email lists of doctors that you can get a hold of for support. So the day-to-day, I don't really feel is that much different. It's more the overall, you know, there's more scheduled CE that's provided by that company versus you seeking it out yourself. There's just kind of a different feel of having those support systems. I think a lot of corporate dentists sometimes aren't as involved in the ADA or their state dental societies, because a lot of what is offered, I work in membership for the FDA on our committee there, and that's one of the biggest challenges is, if you don't have to pay for those benefits, they're not the same benefits, but they can feel the same when you're right out of school, of having that network of people. So that part is a little bit different. For me, what was really like starkly different from private practice is the fact that ultimately I didn't have the control of certain things that I do in private practice. Even as an associate, I, day to day can have a little bit more control over how systems run or if I want to change something. And in corporate practice, that wasn't always the case.
All right, we have one more question that we'll get to real quick. Do you recommend to have a master's in public health?
I'm glad somebody asked that, because as I answered the last question, I started thinking about what I should have said. So I guess first off, it probably could be beneficial depending on what your goals are. Now, for me, I really wanted a little bit extra understanding of what public health really was about. So what I did is I did a 1-year public health certificate graduate program through the University of Iowa. And that lasted partially through the last few months of my 4th year of dental school, and then I finished it up in December of that year. And that's been pretty helpful just to kind of understand some of the systems, some of the politics behind things, how things work locally and how to make changes locally. But yeah, so I think it can be beneficial depending on what your goals are and how involved you plan to be in those sorts of things. And the other thing that I wanted to mention for the last question is not only is there the option of the Masters of Public Health or a certificate program, but also a public health residency program. That is a specialty that you can do. So I hope that answered both of those questions with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all the wonderful questions. If you're looking for more career-focused education, join us live at National Leadership Conference in Chicago. Registration is now open, or be sure to register for any of our upcoming Career Compass webinars. We would like to thank all of you for participating in tonight's program. I would also like to thank a fantastic panelist. They were all ASDA leaders, and we hope you will consider how much that has added to their careers. This program was recorded and it will be posted on ASDA's website and emailed to all participants. We will also send a brief survey on tonight's program and would appreciate your input so we can ensure that we are offering the resources that our members need. All surveys completed will be entered for a portfolio and gift certificate for business cards. Throughout Career Week, there will be webinars, blog posts, Instagram takeovers, and pointers to great resources. Join us tomorrow for our Interviewing Skills webinar. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great night.